Hello and welcome. My name's Dr. Tina Ray, and today I'm going to focus on understanding and supporting our refugee children and young people and those exposed to the trauma of war. This presentation primarily focuses upon my new resource for Routledge publishers, and this book aims to support parents, carers and professionals in the school context and out of the school context who are aiming to support our children and young people in a time of trauma around the world, specifically when we're thinking about the war in Ukraine and other wars and conflicts that we are experiencing and have knowledge of ourselves. There is a need for this at this time, which is really evident. And we need to understand how we can support our refugee children and young people in the safest, most effective and evidence-based way. This means that we have to understand trauma, how it manifests itself in a child or young person, and how that has implications for learning in a classroom context. And also the ways in which we can and should be able to develop effective whole school and individual approaches to supporting our children and young people. Alongside this, the publication that I have completed for Routledge also highlights the importance and need to support refugee parents as they are supporting their children entering into these new schools and new environments. We need to know what works well, ultimately, so that we can navigate what are essentially evidence-based approaches, things that we know as psychologists, as those who work with children and young people on a regular basis, in this particular area that we know works for them and essentially can and does promote post-trauma growth. So in a nutshell, this resource is divided into 7 chapters. The first chapter focuses on how we talk to our children and young people about war and conflict in a safe way, challenging some of the things that they may be witnessing on the TV or via social media, ensuring that we actually demystify this concept of war and really allow them and enable them to fact check appropriately, but also to understand what they can and cannot control. The second chapter focuses on trauma, how it impacts on us as individuals, as human beings, both adults and children, and the implications of that for us in terms of learning and socialization. Chapter 3 specifically targets this notion that we need to support our refugee children and young people effectively and provides a range of tools and strategies to do this. The fourth chapter focuses on the need for self-care for those who are supporting traumatized children and young people. And this, of course, is an essential. You cannot, for example, help to support a child to become regulated if you are not regulated yourself. So self-care is paramount in this whole process. The role of refugee parents and carers forms chapter 5 of this resource. And again, this is significant because there will be particular issues and concerns around helping a child who's experiencing symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, whose sleeping is disruptive, who is having repeated flashbacks. So these are really practical ideas contained within this chapter to support those specific parents and carers of refugee children. Then the next 2 chapters provide a range of really beautifully presented, user-friendly resources for both children and young people and carers and professionals. And I will be presenting a few of these so that you have these in a nutshell to take away with you. So at this moment, it's really important that we factor into our thinking that in schools, what's so important is that they do provide a safe base for our children. And this is really important. That notion of safety at the outset is essential. Practical help and advice, providing this sanctuary, this safety net, is a really helpful starting point for all of our children, rather than focusing on a therapeutic care plan. Some children at the top end of the continuum who have been severely traumatized may well need this in time, but others will not. They will need primarily, essentially in the first instance, to be in a safe space. I also think we need to listen carefully to our children and young people, and I emphasize this in chapter 1 of the book and in chapter 2 also. Very important. Not all refugee children will be the same or will have experienced the same level of distress and trauma. And very often, most children will be saying to us as the adults, I just want to be treated like everyone else. And we know this from the research. One child that I worked with many years ago when I was a teacher in London came to the country from Somalia and was very traumatized, very distressed, but immediately was beginning to feel safe within the school context. He didn't want to talk about what he'd experienced for many, many months. So this watchful waiting process had to happen. But when he did light up, his face totally lit up when I asked him which football team he supported. And I think that's essential too. This sense of normality matters so much. And of course, children react differently following trauma. And this will be dependent on some key factors. Again, I make this clear in the book itself. The child's developmental level, how much they can understand, how much they can process, their intellectual capacity will make a difference, because it will make a difference as to how much they may or may not have absorbed and understood. Their previous life experiences, if they were brought up in a very resilient, safe household, this will have given them an underlying residual level of resilience. Their level of exposure to the trauma, of course, how long for? How much did they understand within that process too? And also, what about the adults around them, how they reacted to the trauma, and how many changes in their living circumstances they had to encounter and cope with. But again, the essential thing is to reinforce this, that the majority of children are, in fact, resilient. And this is why it's important not to panic when we first have children coming into school and we feel at a loss as to how to support them. And this, for me, was one of the main drivers for producing this resource. People said to me frequently, teachers and other professionals in school, we feel we don't know what to do. So I am really, really keen to get across this notion that this is practical, user-friendly, and common sense psychology. All of us can create what I call the trauma-informed classroom, creating a safe base for our children. So ensuring that they feel that they belong, they're part of the group. We can do that with nurturing approaches, that things are predictable because they would have come from high levels of unpredictability, so that it's the same routines, they know what to expect. It's organized in a way that includes them, that they have peers to support them, that regulation, opportunities to calm down, to feel regulated, to engage in deep breathing, mindfulness approaches, for example, all of those are incorporated into the school day, alongside, of course, differentiating for them in the right way, very often involving the use of peer support, but also professionals who maybe speak their own language and can help to translate and give them the kind of support they need at the outset. And key to healing trauma, in my view, of course, is relationships, good, solid, nurturing relationships. And that's what we can provide in the classroom context. In 2015, the National Union of Teachers in the UK identified 6 main areas of support for our refugee children. And again, this you will find in the introduction to the publication. Asking for help and support is an essential for our refugee families, knowing what's out there, being targeted in the right way by the right professionals. And as schools and as professionals, we can provide the right level of induction for them. So providing, for example, essentially support for language development, because the biggest barrier for children and young people coming in is their inability to access the language, to understand their peers, to feel integrated, to feel part of this new community. So utilising skills of other children, maybe others who maybe have some of that first language, others who can support them emotionally, show them around, become peer buddies, and also those who can actually provide resources in terms of dual language support. And that is an essential. And a climate in which they feel welcomed and nurturing. So signs around the school in dual languages. You are welcome here. This is your classroom. You are safe here. This is a safe space for you. This is who to go to get help from. And the pictures of the members of staff, that key members that they can go and seek out if they feel distressed or unhappy or in need of additional support. And also, of course, making the curriculum accessible. And teachers generally are incredibly good and skilled in this area. And making use of your English as second language members of the staff team is actually crucial at this juncture. Organising the classroom in a way that those children feel supported, not singled out as unique individuals, but supported to become part of that classroom community. And of course, this does demand a great deal of us as adults. But I think all of us are very well aware of the need to become those supportive adults who can truly listen to children and young people and provide this safe space for them. But that means that we need to understand how the brain works, how it's affected by trauma, and how we can self-regulate ourselves and then co-regulate with those children. So there is a great deal within this resource in terms of strategies and tools around regulation, how to regulate ourselves and how to help children regulate themselves too. The 3 R's are key to this: regulate, reason, and relate. Okay, so regulate, focusing on soothing the child, helping them to feel calm, safe, and loved, using the right language when we relate to them. So I can see you're upset. I can feel that you are. That's clear that you are really, really feeling overwrought at the moment. I can focus on this with you. Let's reason now that you're calming down. We're doing some deep breathing together. We'll hold each other's hands. Copy me, copy my breathing. Let's just take the breath in and slowly release it out, because that way we can begin to calm to the extent that we can then engage cognitively and reason. And I think it's those 3 things that are essential: to regulate, relate, and reason. But we can't relate or reason until the child or young person is regulated. So developing our own repertoire of skills in this area is clearly essential. When we feel anxious or overwhelmed, we can make use of breathing exercises. So again, this page is taken directly from my book. For children and young people, having a go at these particular exercises using a breathing ball, holding that ball, breathing in for 4 seconds, holding it for 4 seconds, and then breathing out for 6. They can repeat this 3 times and build it up to 5 or 10. Or then there's the 5-finger breathing. Okay, so you can move slowly up the index finger or the thumb, either way, but breathing in and breathing out as you come down, breathing in and breathing out as you come down until you finish your whole hand. So 5-finger breathing. And then, of course, woodcutter breaths. So standing normally, taking a slow, deep breath in and going onto your tiptoes with both hands high above your head, breathing out quickly, bringing your head and your hands low between your legs as if you're cutting wood. So these are very simple, and there are many more in the publication. And maybe these are things that you can directly take away today in terms of helping the children to regulate themselves. Another area of work that I think is really important when particularly working with individual children and building up their resilience, their self-esteem, and their ability to begin to navigate this new context is to conduct this tree of life exercise. So working together with them to complete this tree of life. And this can be drawn out. Within the resource, there is a format for this, but you can take a lot of time over this. Sometimes the therapist will take maybe 5 or 6 weeks working individually on a regular basis, but other times the child may want to do this or complete this on their own. It really depends on the stage at which that child is at. But again, the ground representing your day-to-day activities, the roots representing where you come from. So reinforcing, this is where I'm from, this is my identity. The fruit, the gifts from important people that they've given you, the branches, your hopes, your goals, the leaves, those important people in your life. And that's reassuring, because knowing who they are, also, you know who they are, that those people that you can go to when you feel down or upset or anxious. Your trunk is your skills, your abilities, the things that you can do. So again, this is positive psychology. This is about identifying strengths, not deficits. But we will think about the storms. What are the challenges? And then reflect on that. What can I use from my trunk, from my branches, from my leaves, the important people to support me to meet those challenges? Another exercise from this publication is the memory box. And I think this is vital. We often use this when a child has been bereaved. And what we have to remember about refugee children is that they are experiencing very similar process of grief and bereavement that we would experience had we lost someone who perhaps had died due to COVID, due to another illness. But for children, they've come away from everything that they've known. They've lost their friends. They've lost the security of their own schools, their context, their teachers, sometimes their parents too. This is the bereavement. This is a loss. So it's important for them to be able to focus on all the good things in their lives, to take some time to create a memory box of all those wonderful things they are missing, they feel the loss of, but also hold special memories for them. Because actually, being able to then open that box, look into it, and take out some of those objects, some of those things that they may have written on pieces of paper, is very important because it reminds them of the good times. And that gives us hope because it allows us and enables us to feel and think that maybe those good times can and will happen again. So this is one simple exercise, and there are many, many more, obviously, in the resource. This is reinforced again by the hopes and dreams part, another very simple exercise that I actually think I've used with parents, refugee parents, and with children, in order to really begin to focus on the fact that even after all the trauma and even experiencing some of the privations that they are continuing to experience and some of the fears that they are continuing to hold onto, that they can still have hope. So thinking about our hopes and dreams for the future and the importance of holding on to these no matter what is happening, where it's happening, what we know is being experienced by other people that we love who may still be in that war zone. We need to be able to hope and feel that we have a future, that they have a future ahead of them that can be something quite special. So alongside identifying my strengths and my resources, my resilience factors in many of the other activities, it's how do I then use these and translate these and make the most of them in terms of developing a better future for myself and those I love. So this is a brief whistle-stop tour of this resource, but I'm hoping that maybe a few of those tools that I've just described, you will feel able to think about further and take away and adopt perhaps in your own practice, and obviously make reference to in the publication itself. I would be really pleased if people went away from listening to this short presentation with a sense of hope and with a sense of knowing that actually many people in schools are currently doing lots of things very well. And rather than panic and think that this is something totally new, to actually reflect on what it is that they're doing. What is it that you're already doing in your context? Because there will be lots, including creating safe spaces, making use of peer support, making use of appropriate translation services to ensure that parents, refugee parents, and their children are included, and making sure that things are made accessible for them in the school and in the community around the school. I think also a key nugget here, and I think this is the golden thread throughout this presentation, is that really most of our children are very resilient and they will engage in post-trauma growth subsequent to becoming a refugee and coming to our countries. And simply being in school can be the very best medicine. Being in school is absolutely vital, alongside maintaining that level of hope and thinking all the time about, there are good things going on out there. When things get bad and we're looking at all the trauma, for example, on the television, on the news reports, look for the helpers, look for those people who are there, who are trying to support, making a difference, because there are lots of them, and they should give us hope in human nature. We also need very much as professionals, parents and carers to understand trauma, how it manifests itself, and what we can do to create trauma-informed spaces and approaches, and be the emotionally available adult who is self-regulated. And that's a tall order. But as the adults, as the professionals, we can learn the skills of regulation in order to model them and share them with our children and young people. Listening to what they need, and I think this is important too. My book provides a wealth of information and a wealth of resources, but this is not a one-size-fits-all approach. Every child is different. Every refugee child is different. So it's not about this is a be all and end all, or this is a one size all approach, one size fits all approach. It's about working out what works for each child, and they need their voices heard in this process. This will or will not work for me. This is what I'm comfortable with now, or this isn't what I'm comfortable with experiencing now. And ultimately, of course, if we work together as a team, reflecting, exchanging observations, keeping each other informed, parents, carers, refugee parents, everyone in the school community, then I think we can really recognise more significant vulnerabilities over time and provide the additional support through the external agencies. If we feel unsure, let's ask for help. That's a strength. Let's get the school psychologist involved. Anyone who is out there who is working in a CAM service, who is working for a specialist therapeutic mental health organisation, will be able to offer something in this area. And even if that is in the first instance is simply a consultation. So there is help, there is support out there. Hopefully this has given you a whistle-stop tour, but also some key tools to take away. And it may be helpful just to stop and reflect yourself subsequent to this presentation and think, how would you use this resource in your role? What specific chapters and areas would be most pertinent to you, but what might also be helpful to those that you're working with or that you support? So thank you very much for listening, and I hope that this has been useful and helpful, and I really do hope that you take a look at my book. Thank you.